So, Brian, I want to thank you for coming on all the way from West Palm, 10 minutes away from here.
Yeah.
Congratulations on your coming up on 2 years of sobriety.
January 1. Yeah.
January. Okay, so a
Yeah.
year and a half,
Yeah.
2
We're
years.
there.
I like to round up always. I'm at 7.5. I really have 8 years of sobriety now. Well, congrats, man.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate you coming on.
you for
You're
having
originally from New York?
From Brooklyn. So
Yeah.
just before we get started, I just really want to thank you.
Mm.
It's kind of surreal to be here because this is something that I've been wanting to do for a long time. And you're somebody that I've been watching maybe since you started. I think you're doing this about 6-7 months.
Yeah, about a year.
A year. So
Yeah.
I've been watching for about 6 months, and it's just an honor to be here and the work that you're doing. And I just hope from this interview and then thereafter that I'm able to just continue to do what I need to do and hopefully make you proud in so many ways. So just really thank you for doing what you're doing.
I appreciate that. And what a lot of my guests don't understand, they're like, oh, thank you for giving me a platform. And I'm like, no, thank you for coming on because you're the one here getting vulnerable.
Right.
You're the one sharing your lowest point. You're the one sharing the steps of humility that you had to take and putting yourself out there so that it helps the person who is struggling and listening to this
Sure.
know that they're not alone. So
Right.
I have so much respect for each and every one of my guests. And dude, you reached out. You're like, love to be a guest. And
Yeah.
you were very enthusiastic about it. And and clearly it's just to help someone else. You're not here promoting anything. Not saying that people that come on here who write a book or whatever promote anything. That's not their first intention. But it's an honor to have you on.
Thank
So
you. I appreciate it. Really.
yeah. Tell us a little bit about what it was like growing up in Brooklyn.
So yeah, I mean, I grew up in Gravesend, Brooklyn. I'm half Italian, half Irish. Only child, which is kind of a big part of my story, as you'll come to see. Great upbringing, I mean, my parents, similar to yours, similar to our mutual friend Lewis, just amazing people. Church-going people. My mother is a Eucharistic minister now. They have keys to the church. They live across the street from the church. So, religious background. They were very strict with me, extremely strict with me as a child. My mother babied me. My mother gave me whatever I asked for. And I think at an early age, I didn't consciously do this, but I started to I started really early on with manipulation, right? And anything that I wanted, I would get, and I would think that was how I was receiving love, right? So that started at an early age. As I look back, one thing that I just want to touch on from my past, because it's kind of important as I move forward in my life, is my background, my family background. So, my grandfather on my mother's side is Italian, and his family was in the funeral business. So we lived next door to the funeral home, and as I look back at that now, and as this has been coming up with some of the therapy that I've been doing, is my relationship to death has been very weird and not natural. And as I've come to see, is that then it was very easy for me throughout then what we would call my adult life, that losing people, no value. I had no value, and it all, I feel, comes from my relationship with death. I was basically in and out of the funeral home on a daily basis. I think also energetically living next to the funeral home. My mother grew up in that home. My grandfather was a gambling addict. He was kind of a man that never grew up in many senses. He had to leave throughout her life. They would send him away for 6 months so they could clear up his issues, and then he would come back. So that energy was in the home, and the energy of just living there, I think kind of played out further in my life with different things.
So, like, would you look out your window and see a family at the funeral home just grieving
all the time?
And then you said you actually were in and out of the
In and
funeral
out.
home.
I mean,
So
it was, the family business. So, and then sometimes when we would have packages dropped off, if we weren't, I was at school, my parents were at work, the packages were dropped off next door, and I would go and get them. So it was in and out. And then it became such a pattern of our life that when I lost family members, when I lost my grandparents and different family members, it was a routine.
Hey guys, quick update. Every Monday night, I host the Rise Above Recovery meeting. It's an open meeting for any addiction, alcohol, drugs, gambling, food, whatever you're struggling with, you're welcome here. To get the meeting link and weekly updates, just email me at kevin@riseabovepod.com and I'll add you to the list. Also, if this podcast has helped you, please like, subscribe, or leave a rating. It helps us continue to spread the message of hope. Lastly, if you'd like to go even deeper with Rise Above, check out our Patreon. Supporters get access to live interviews and can chat with guests after the interview. Thank you. You were numb to it.
I was numb to it from an early age where, yes, I felt the loss. Yes, I was sad, but it wasn't really processed. It
was common.
It was very common.
Because you had been around. Yeah, when a kid that young is around that 24/7, you can't escape it. It's right next door to your home.
I would look out the window and
it's embedded in your life.
Yes.
So, okay. So you go on. Did you end up going? Did you start helping out at the funeral home? Was it like a family business kind of thing?
Never. It was like, so my grandfather was like the black sheep of the family.
Mm-hmm.
He was a sibling of. He had 5 other siblings, and he was the youngest, and he was kind of like the outcast.
Got it.
And they would just always be having to fix his issues. But, my parents still to this day, just with the network of people that they have, and they're, so loved, and so many people that they know, they're going to funerals and wakes every other week.
You said your grandfather was a gambler, and you said he's Italian, very Italian. Not to... Whatever, I'll just say. Was it with the mob? Was he gambling and getting involved?
I believe
with some shady
so.
people.
I mean, they supposedly came over with the original kind of Godfather.
Yeah.
So they had that relationship with, per se, the top person.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's why he was sent to places like Arizona and stuff like that, so they could clear up his issues. Right? They were in the funeral business. They were in the legitimate business.
Yeah.
They were undertakers, and they would just clear it up, and then he would come back.
Yeah.
Right. As we go further in discussion, as I look back at that, my mother had a rough life, right? A rough childhood, and then dealing with me hasn't been the easiest, right? So that's tough to look back at.
Yeah,
very tough. But
were you playing sports at all at a young age?
So yes. So my dad is 6'8".
Oh wow.
My mother's 5 foot. So I'm right in the average at 6 feet. Dynamic couple. To say the least. So my dad was a basketball player. He was drafted by the Knicks in like the 7th or 10th round, and he didn't make it, but he was a big time basketball junkie player. So yeah, it was instilled in me to play basketball. And, one thing, what they did with me was in the summer, as I got older, 8th grade and then going into high school, every single summer they would send me away and to basketball camps. They would drive me to North Carolina, Georgia. Every week they would send me away, and they did that, yes, to try to get me into basketball, and I loved basketball. But they also did that, I think, also just to keep me out of the neighborhood.
Yeah, Were you okay with going to these camps, or was it something that you didn't want to do? Because I'm asking this because my parents used to send me to basketball camp too, like 7th, 8th, and I think 9th grade. I hated it. I dreaded it.
I remember liking it, but one thing that I remember very specifically was that then when we would go as a family, we would go to like the Jersey Shore for the summer, right? And my father would wake me up at like the crack of dawn, and he would take me to go practice on the basketball court early in the morning. It's hot as anything. My mother would stay in the hotel. And it wasn't just like taking jump shots. It's like doing suicides and
Drilling and
doing drills. And I would be so angry. And I would never let it out on my father. So I'd come back to the hotel and I would just be so mean and angry to my mother.
yeah.
So early on, I was letting out this frustration, this anger that I had within me. And I, maybe I didn't love it, but I kind of loved the group aspect of it. My teammates, my friends, that I loved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you get into high school. Do you continue to play basketball through high school?
I did, and then once I hit like the varsity team, I was just kind of a role player and didn't really play much. But prior to that, and like I would say about 6th or 7th grade, so early 90s, I was diagnosed with ADHD and had severe learning issues. I was diagnosed, but never really treated. I think it was so early on that at the time they didn't know how or what to do. I think it was maybe suggested that I go on medication. My parents were like, absolutely not. Thankfully, I'm glad that they decided that. But then, I went throughout high school, kind of always just being an average student, but really struggling with learning. And as we go further in the conversation, the drugs kind of made a real detrimental effect on that, where it's still to this day, I have extreme issues.
So when did you start drinking, and then when did you start experimenting with drugs?
So going through high school, they were extremely strict with me.
Yeah.
Very strict. And I didn't drink much. Like I wasn't going out, junior, senior year. Maybe a little bit towards senior year, maybe a little smoking pot, but not a lot. Just because it was kind of home. Yes, I had my friends, but they were strict. So really, it all started in college. I went to Loyola in Baltimore.
It's a great school.
Yeah, it was a great school.
You graduate, you go there, and now you're away from home.
I'm away from home.
Yeah,
So
you're staying on
first time
campus.
on my own. I'm an only child, and I went to Xavier High School in Manhattan. So another Jesuit high school, college institution. And so freshman year, remembering back. So I was never a big drinker, right? And I remember freshman year going to the bars, everybody would order the shots. I remember like Goldschlager. And I would like either throw it behind my shoulder or throw it down on the floor. I would never take it because I would like gag from it. I didn't like it.
Yeah.
I think I started smoking a little more heavily, smoking pot. But really where everything kind of hit ahead was my junior year. I went to study abroad in Florence. And my friends were all throughout Europe, mainly in Belgium. And that's where it all started with ecstasy, cocaine, overseas.
Okay, so do you think it started junior year? However, you said your parents were very strict. And I'm asking this for the parents that are listening now who don't know whether they should be strict, whether they should be, giving their kids kind of that autonomy to an extent. Do you think that when you went away to college and things, junior year, your drug use starts to take off quite a bit, do you think that was a problem, or do you think
how
strict they were and everything, or do you think if you were exposed to it maybe a little bit younger?
It's funny you ask that, because really, and we'll back up in a second from college, because when I came home from being abroad, I took a shift and kind of started my drug career. But before that, go ahead.
No. Go ahead. You go. Because I was going to say, you know what? Then let's just gloss over that. Why don't you finish out your
Yeah, because
abroad
I was going to
story.
touch on that.
Perfect.
All
So
right.
then you continue. You're abroad. You're in Florence.
Abroad, start doing ecstasy. I'm in Prague, Amsterdam,
Mhm.
and cocaine, and I'm loving it. You know, it's great. It's euphoric. It's just I really jumped right into it.
Yeah.
So I come home, and I think shortly thereafter I start selling cocaine. Yeah.
You do cocaine for the first time
First
abroad.
time
You
start
come back.
doing
You
it.
start selling coke.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. How do you find the coke connect?
And let me just preface by saying that I was never that person. You know, I wasn't, not only to say that I was never raised that way, I was never built for a life like that. You
Yeah.
know, and it's not knocking anybody that is in the world of drug dealing or anything like that, but you know, I'm somebody that I never took a punch my whole life, you know, and that's part of also the issue, which we'll get to. But I wasn't a street kid, you know, like I don't know what the desire that I had. Looking back, it was to be accepted, right? I had a lot of insecurities, was extremely immature, still till this day in so many ways. So I think it was acceptance to be in an in crowd, to give myself a label, you know, and so that's what I started to do at that age.
Okay, so you come back, you start selling coke, and you felt this level of acceptance when you went abroad and you were doing these drugs with all of these people, and then you're like, "F it, let's just go full fledged into this and
Yeah.
start selling." And then also you have it at your disposal as well.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And I was driving back and forth from Baltimore to New York to get my stuff on my own, and then like driving back at the middle of the night, doing it as I'm driving back.
Yeah.
And then that became then my process, and that would last for, you know, I'll share, for 10 years.
Okay, so you were selling coke for essentially 10 years.
No, or using.
Coke use. Got
Yeah.
it.
But-
Okay, so you're probably 21. You're going into your senior year of college at Loyola. You're doing coke. You're selling it.
Selling it to all the athletes,
Athletes.
Johns Hopkins lacrosse players. So I'm in the in crowd.
Yep.
Right. Instead of establishing myself as a regular person to be in the in crowd and having that confidence within myself, I decided to go that route. And that's really how it was.
Do you end up graduating college on
Yes.
time?
Yes.
Okay, so you graduate. What do you end up doing after college?
So the year before, so 2000, I interned for that summer at Cantor Fitzgerald at the World Trade. And it was a family friend that was like head of HR, got me in there. When I wound up graduating, I got a job before I graduated somewhere else within the Wall Street sector. He was no longer working at Cantor. Had he been working, I probably would have been there come 01. But he wasn't. So graduating from college, I come home. I'm working kind of back office work, prime brokerage for clearance for hedge funds, working in that industry. So I had a job before I graduated. I remember taking my finance exam at graduation. I was borderline almost failing the class. And I was always good at writing. I was always good at expressing my emotions through writing. And I remember writing the professor, like, look, please, all I need to do is pass this class. I already have a job at this financial institution. Please just pass. So still the manipulation was always going, right? I come home, and this is where I'd like to touch on what you previously asked, was that I start gambling heavily. Start gambling. So the consequences then, right? I would always say to myself, I never verbally said this to my parents, but I would always say to myself, well, they were so strict with me. You know, what would have been the worst thing to happen when I was a child? I would have gotten drunk. I would have maybe smoked pot and maybe then realized that I didn't like it. Now look at the effects of me being and them being so strict with me. Now I'm going to gamble my life away. I'm going to continue to do drugs. And this is what now I've turned into. And so that's what transpired in my early 20s.
It's almost like you played into it subconsciously.
Yes.
And that's funny
Absolutely.
that you you had those thoughts. My question before was how strict
Exactly
they
that.
were.
Yes.
I hear that a lot on this show. Strict parents or even parents that just didn't give a shit, right? It's
Right.
so hard to be a parent. Like they did the best that they could with what they had.
And they did amazing. Looking
Yeah.
back at it, they were strict for a reason.
Yeah.
But I didn't understand
Of
that. We didn't
course.
discuss it. It was never really discussed.
Yeah.
I'm half Irish. We like to throw things under the table. We don't like to bring things to the surface.
Very prideful.
Yes. So once the gambling started and I continued to use, I wasn't selling anymore at that point. Later on, we come back to that. But at that point, I was just using, right? I was working, using. And with the gambling, it was bad. And I would always then turn to my mother to help bail me out. And that was tough, right? That was, I was tough, and my father never knew about it. And so that was a process for me for up until probably 30 years old.
Did you get yourself into a pretty big hole by the time you were 30 years old?
Always.
And, how much were you gambling?
I mean, you would get accounts from people in the neighborhood, and I was just gambling thousands that I didn't have,
Yep.
right, and never won, and I would just always then just have her bail me out. No, it's not going to happen again, right? It's not going to happen again, and that was just the process of my life, and I'm using at the time, so my mind isn't really conscious of what the mistakes that I'm making. And, I never really thought about my future. What am I going to do with my life? It was never a thought to me.
And what was the drug use like? Was it just strictly cocaine, drinking, smoking weed occasionally? And it's crazy because once we come across like the ecstasy, cocaine, bigger and harder drugs, smoking weed is always there, but it takes that back seat. It's not a priority really anymore.
Yeah, cocaine was primarily my go-to, and just was doing heavily.
Yeah.
And this goes back, and I'm going to mention a few times, is the effect that it had on me as a person and with my brain is a lot different than people. So
it calmed you down.
It calmed me, and I was an introvert to begin with. It made me more of an introvert. I didn't speak on it. As the years progressed, I started also, like, I wouldn't be able to get my words out when I was on cocaine. I wasn't speaking. And then after, even when I wasn't on it, I was seeing that my speech, like, I would stutter. It was affecting different areas of my brain and who I was as a person.
Yeah. It's funny, I have ADHD really, really bad. And when I would do coke, it would calm me. Like I'm content and I'm just chilling. When I do opiates, it used to have produce the effect that cocaine would
Correct. Same.
produce for your average
Same. Like
person.
You're not falling asleep.
No, I'll clean your house.
Right. Oh,
What do you want me to do? You want to go run a marathon? Let's go run a marathon. Give me an Oxy 80. We're good to go.
Right.
So this goes on. When does the coke and this kind of lifestyle kind of start to impact your day-to-day and your job and relationships? What does that look like?
So I remember it wasn't really impacting my job. So just kind of to go through just quickly with career, I was working on Wall Street, and then as I kind of needed to make this step within that career, next step was like taking like a Series 7 or something like that. And again, with my learning difficulties, I wasn't able to do that. So that's where I kind of took a shift and was like, okay, this isn't for me. And I went into building management for Bear Stearns. So we were doing like construction within the building, reconstructing offices within the building. And what I remember back from that was that I was going out a lot. And this is a pretty, funny story. I had a George Costanza moment where I went out one night during the week, And I came back to the office probably at like 3, 4 in the morning, and I fell asleep under the desk. And I didn't wake up till we're in cubicles, till everybody else was at their desk. So I'm under my desk sleeping. Everybody else is sitting there. They don't see me. So I'm like, shit, I can't just come out of the desk. I have to wait till maybe they go to the bathroom. And I started realizing that, I'm screwing up my life, but I didn't stop.
Yeah.
I didn't stop.
But it's crazy. You were always able to show up and
I
maneuver
was.
yourself through it.
Yes.
I was able to do that for a while.
Yes.
And I would always justify my drug use, my drinking. Anytime someone would come to me and say, "Oh, I think you have a problem," or, say anything about my drinking or drugging, I'd be like, "No, like I have this corporate job. Like I'm doing great."
Never realized I was an addict.
What are you doing?
Right.
Throw it right back at them.
Right.
So when does the coke kind of come to a head and that kind of lifestyle and the gambling and
So I think it comes to a head leading towards 30, which
Okay.
is going to be the years really of main focus from 30 to 45, right?
Yeah.
But as I just kind of started getting sick of feeling like shit on coke, to be honest with you. And I remember a specific story. And again, just being the introvert, not being able to be my true self. I didn't even know what my true self was. And I remember going out one night and I said to myself, I'm not going to do coke tonight. And I didn't do it. And I felt great. I had a few drinks, right? Pick up a girl. We're out at a club. I pick up a girl and everything was flowing. I was able to speak, and she was like, "Oh, would you mind giving me a ride home?" Sure. So I'm driving back to Brooklyn. I'm on the BQE. We're talking, and I turned to her, and I said to her, I said, I'm really proud of myself tonight. She was like, well, why is that? I said, I didn't do coke, and she's like, wow, that's awesome. Good for you. And I remember this moment because now what transpired thereafter. So we're driving. It was pouring rain. And I get off her exit and I'm making like a left, a right, making 2 turns. Then she's like, all right, the next left. I make a left that's on her block. I hit a car. I land on 2 wheels like this in a Cadillac STS, which is a huge big body Cadillac. I land vertical like this on 2 wheels. Luckily, the car that I hit had 0 damage. So I don't even know if I skid out or anything like that. And it was just crazy. My friends were making fun of me like, oh, you drop a girl off in front of her house on 2 wheels.
Oh my God.
And so that was just a moment to be like, okay, I was clearly drunk, right?
Yeah.
But
you weren't on coke.
But I wasn't on coke. Really,
Maybe if you were on coke, you would have been okay. You would have hit that turn
right
on spot.
But leading up to 30, I started getting sick of coke, and 30 is a turning point for me because I get into the best personal and relationship with a woman that changes my life at 30. And so cocaine and relationships does not go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And so really at that point, I stopped for a moment, right? Yeah. But from day one of that relationship, I was in way over my head. I wasn't ready to be in a relationship. There was much more that I needed to work on top of the addiction.
Can you elaborate a little more on what it was in hindsight that you needed to work on and you didn't really know at the time?
Yeah. So a lot of anger issues, to be honest with you, since I always harnessed my mother with getting me out of trouble, I never was able to stand on my 2 feet.
Yeah.
Really ever. And so then to jump into a relationship, I now substituted that person with my mother, right? I took away from dealing with my mom and I took this person and I substituted it. So immediately the anger coming out towards her, very bad behavior, very, a lot of verbal abuse early on. And this is, and the drug use at that point was probably just pot. Again, maybe I was doing cocaine on occasion, but really not much. It was still around, but it wasn't around that much.
Yeah.
Right.
So this relationship was through your 30s, essentially.
Started at 30. Yes,
Okay.
Yes.
And did she
A lot.
use or anything? Was
No,
she?
no.
She was a good
She's-
girl.
Yeah. I mean, probably the healthiest person that I'll ever meet.
Yeah.
And we'll touch on that a little bit shortly.
Yeah.
But extremely healthy. I mean, when we did meet, yes, we were like going out. But she was building an empire and a business and building herself from right when we met, and and then what she did in those 15 years, having to deal with me, and then seeing what she accomplished is just it's extraordinary.
So why don't you walk us through your 30s? Give us like the highlight stuff that had happened, where your drug use was at and drinking. Because I know, and just to prepare the audience, your 40s is where things really explode. And
so it is where it really explodes. And it needed to happen, which we'll get to. But at 34, I had a major event occur. In my late 20s, I get into the construction industry, where I'm a concrete union laborer. So I'm working on all of the top high rises in New York City. We're building high rises, great industry, filled with guys with big egos, kind of like a fraternity, and everybody's on drugs, right? Everybody's using. And the crazy thing about that, and as we'll talk about it, I wound up getting into the safety business years later, construction safety. Looking back at the early times of construction, everybody was using, but everybody had each other's back. Like, there weren't sites that I was on, there weren't accidents, there weren't, so it's functional using throughout the day. And at 34, I had a huge turning point, a huge sign from God. I didn't realize at the time. So I'm working at the World Trade Center for about 2 years at this point. It's 2013. And when I started working at the World Trade Center, like I just said, everybody's using opioids, cocaine, marijuana, all of it. It's heavily used. I would say 70% of the workforce. So I get this idea at 34, what's going on in my brain, to say, okay, I'm going to start selling drugs. And what I remember was that I'm in a centralized area, right? So a hard part about selling drugs is going from point A to point B. But I'm in one place. I don't have to move around. Everybody's here. Great opportunity. So I start selling cocaine, opioids, and a little bit of marijuana. And what I'd like to touch on that is that when I wasn't doing the opioids at that point, and the people that were buying them from me would ask me, do you take these? And I would say, no, I don't. And they would say, good, man. Don't ever take these. Stay on your side. Whatever it is that you do, stick to that. Don't ever come to this side.
What opiates were they?
They were Roxy's, blues.
Perk 30s.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. Yep. And I remember that now. I didn't remember it as years went on. And so what hit ahead then was I got arrested. I got arrested down at the World Trade Center.
Can you walk us through the day you got arrested?
Yes, huge public arrest. It's a Friday. So I would always go in on a Friday. Everybody's paid on Thursday. So whoever has bills with me, Friday I go in with $60 in my pocket, and then I'm picking up money from what's owed to me and then what they're picking up for the weekend. So Friday is a big day for me. Cars loaded up. So I pull into my parking garage, which was an outside one where all the cars were stacked. And I had a deal with the guy that he would always keep me in the back on the first floor, because at lunch I would have a line of guys waiting to walk to the car. So I pull in, it's like 6:30 in the morning, and, just cars just bombard me. And so what transpires is, again, a blessing from God. Uh, if you recall or know, the World Trade Center is controlled by the Port Authority. So they were always at odds with NYPD. Like, you have no jurisdiction here. This is our site. It's our jurisdiction. They were always fighting amongst each other with that. And Port Authority arrested me. So it wasn't a drug arrest, which I didn't know on that day. Put me all over the newspapers. My dad had worked on Wall Street, so it was on like the ticker of the Bloomberg. So all of his friends immediately saw it. Very humiliating. Almost front cover of New York Post, everything. And so I get arrested, perb walk, all of that. I go to central booking. I get out later that night on no bail. And what subsequently winds up happening is that they weren't arresting me for selling drugs. They were just arresting me to show that they were policing their site and that they were cleaning up their site. So totally a blessing from God. My lawyer likes to take some of the credit for that, but really, had they handed over to the NYPD or to the feds, I would have been probably going away.
How much drugs did you have in the car
Ton.
when you were arrested? And
I
they
probably
seized it all?
Yeah, they seized it all.
How much?
Like probably, I would say close to 100 Roxys, close to probably a half ounce of coke bagged up.
And then a ton of weed.
And a ton of weed.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, so you say it wasn't a drug arrest.
So, it was a drug arrest in the sense that, they got winds that I was the main person down there.
Selling.
They arrested me and like 2-3 other kids.
Yep.
All at once. But again, like, had they waited till 12 o'clock, they would have gotten me in hand to hand. Right.
Mm.
And, and I had seen the guys weeks prior. I down in the World Trade Center, you have all federal buildings. So I saw like 2 tall guys on the street 2 weeks prior. And I was like, oh, they're not looking at me. They're probably just feds going into the building or something like that. And
yeah, there was a lot of action going on down there when it was being built.
And I was a little aware of my surroundings. And so it just so happens that those were the guys that picked me up that day, and they interrogated me a little bit. But again, I didn't realize on that day that 6 months later, they just weren't going to bring it to the Supreme Court and they weren't going to press the charges.
What did end up happening legally to you?
0.
You didn't get in any trouble?
Nothing.
You didn't get put on probation or anything?
Nothing.
Was an ACOD, stay out of trouble for 6 months?
Nothing. It wasn't even brought to the court.
Oh, they just dropped the charges?
Or never took the charges they have like a certain time period.
Okay.
Right. To take it to the Supreme Court or to the court. They never did that. They never followed through with it.
Okay. So does this scare the shit out of you?
That is a blessing right there. So what happens at that point is, I'm in extreme depression at that point, right after that. Why did this happen to me? I'm using, I'm using coke, using weed. I'm probably hiding it from my partner. And again, looking back, it was a blessing, right? Because say I stayed in that environment, I would say within a 1 to 2 year gap of that time, people that I was serving either died of overdose or committed suicide, right? I would say a handful of guys within the construction industry. Not only that, I transitioned then at that point and I got into selling real estate. So I get my real estate license because now it's like, what am I going to do? The union didn't throw me out. I tried going back to work, but at that point it was just like, I'm done with this.
Yeah, you're that guy.
I'm that guy. And also people start looking at it like, well, why didn't you go to jail? Right. So then it's like I'm on job sites and then there's chatter like, oh, well, maybe he said something, this, that, and the other thing, which, just wasn't the case. I was lucky that it was Port Authority and it just so happens that that's how it turned out. So I go into start selling real estate. Have a fairly decent career. I think at that point, from the humiliation that my parents felt from that, um, once I start selling real estate, I did it all on my own, didn't ask anybody, didn't utilize like a network from my parents or anybody else. And I think they got proud at that point a little bit that I was able to come back from such a humiliated state, and coming back from that, I think, helped them a
Yeah,
little bit.
that's adversity. And you put the drug selling down.
The selling, absolutely.
Yeah. I
Not
mean,
the using. The
that's a
using
mini
was still
success
there.
story
Yeah.
right there to build back from that. What year are we in right now?
So just going back to that arrest was 2013,
Okay.
and what happens coming from that, amongst what I just shared, coming from that, I'm introduced to an amazing spiritual practice called Kabbalah,
Okay.
through the Kabbalah Center of New York. Late 2013, early 2014, I'm introduced to this by the girl that I'm dating.
Yeah.
Because her friends saw the tough period that she just went through dealing with that with me, and so it was introduced to us. So now I'm introduced to a spiritual practice which I engulf myself into, and it was amazing to start learning. When you start doing things like that, as you start seeing things in a different lens, in a different perspective, right? But as I was going through, this time period, I still was, I was still always holding on to that relationship and the fact that I had no identity of my own, totally to my doing, nothing to do with her. But I wasn't able still to stand on my 2 feet on my own. Zero identity, didn't, wasn't confident, all of that, and I'm introduced to spirituality, and it's working wonders in the beginning, right? But I'm still dealing with a lot personally, because yes, I start getting into real estate, but it's a tough business, and the income isn't coming in as regularly. So I'm still using, on occasion, probably hiding it from her. And then we're going through periods where she'll kick me out and stuff like that, and then get myself back in. So a lot of deep depression is still rooted within me at this point. So yeah.
Okay. So that goes on. Uh, what does the rest of the 2010s look like? So from roughly
This is 2013 when the arrest started.
Yeah.
So like going into 2014, 2015, there was some
spiritual practices that you're
little good stuff going, right? But
Yep.
I'm still using. So like,
you're back
you're
and forth.
trying to learn spiritual practices, but you're not living it, right?
Right.
And
One foot in.
at first I was going to and showing up to the spiritual classes for myself, right? But then there were times where I was not showing up for myself. I was showing up because, it would make her happy,
Of
or
course.
it would help the relationship, right? I want to say around 2015-ish, we're in a little separation. I'm living in like some rundown building that my friend owns, no water running. I want to say it's around like Valentine's Day, so I'm emotional about Valentine's Day. And I wound up picking up a decent amount of coke, and I wrote my parents a letter, and I think I sent my mom a text saying, I left a note for you at my friend's that I'm staying at, and I turned my phone off. And from what I remember back from that is, I was just using coke all throughout the day, going all over the city, and eventually it being 6, 7 o'clock at night, and I was just like feeling like crap. I went to Lenox Hill, and I checked myself in at that point.
Okay. To the psych ward?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what was that like?
Again, I think I was crying for attention, right? I was like, I wanted, I missed the person that I was with. I was in such a hard place still professionally. And so it was a cry for help. I think I didn't realize what I was doing. I thought I was just going to go to the hospital and they were going to calm me down and I was going to leave
Yeah.
because I was like, what do you mean I'm being admitted? And that was a little bit of a rude awakening, but not, I remember like a friend of mine coming and visiting me and bringing me food, and I was like, well, why didn't you bring me this food? And it still didn't sink in what my actions were doing, not only to myself but to the people around me.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Your disease was coming out slowly in different ways.
Yes.
And it's a family disease, and we impact everyone around us.
Correct. Which I never realized. And also, touching a little bit on like repercussions from not getting in trouble from the arrest, right? From not having any severe consequences yet up to this point, my mid to late 30s is becoming an issue, right? That I realize now, didn't realize at the time, and as we'll now probably go into the opioid, is that as I look back at my life, three things that I think would have gotten me to this point where I am today is either jail, incarceration, a good ass beating, like in the hospital, messed up, or opioids. And I chose the latter,
How do you get introduced to opioids?
So I didn't touch. I had taken perk 10s every now and then. It was like a thing that I would take them and then not get hooked or whatever. I remember them feeling good, but wasn't consistent with them. It was
that
like whenever
reference. You knew that they were good, but
I
you
knew
never
that they were
like,
good, but I knew that it felt good. And whenever they were around, maybe I'd get my hands on them, but it wasn't. It was like maybe a few months here and there. So it wasn't a consistent thing. I really, honestly, because this was asked of me from the woman that I was with for 15 years as to how I started. To go back a little bit, when I left the psych ward, I was like, my family members, the person that I was with was like, okay, you have to start. You got to start seeing a psychiatrist at this point, and that's where I was finally diagnosed with my ADHD to start taking Adderall. Prescribed, right? I had dabbled with it recreationally, but never prescribed. And it helped. It did help, right? So that's when I started my construction safety business. I was still selling real estate, and it had me very much dialed in, very focused. That didn't last too long because then I started abusing Adderall. And I don't remember the turning point, but I would say I'm about 39 at this point. I'm 46 now.
so
it's
2018?
2018, correct. Because we have a spiritual wedding in 2018. And I remember it was shortly after that where the using started with the opioids, with the perk 30s, where I started sniffing them. And it started, I think, I'm a construction safety guy. I reconnect with a guy from high school. He was big into them. So I think I had already tried them a little bit, but I think with that relationship, it kind of, started taking over my life. And I was smart enough to start slow, right? Because for anybody that doesn't realize about this drug is any normal person. And the funniest thing is that it's the smallest pill in the world. And any normal person that's never touched opioids, they take that little small pill. They are sick as can be, right? And so for some reason, I knew to start small, right? So I would break a 30 in half, maybe even a quarter, and I was starting slow. And it became a habit, very quickly. And, part of the issue of I never realized I was an addict. Zero. I never thought that thought that it was a problem. Yes. I didn't think of how I was going to stop. It was just, I just kept going. I just kept going. Right. And eventually it lasts for 4 years. Right. And in that 4 years, I got the habit up to like 90 pills a week. So I'm spending like $3,000 a week. I'm making great money.
Mhm.
Um,
It's a $12,000 a month habit.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm Ubering it from, I'm living, I have an apartment in the city, me and my wife at the time, apartment in the city, house in West Hampton, you know, living a great life, right? Just with touching back a little bit, I have a short stint of success, right? And that's the first time period in my life that I'm standing a little bit on my 2 feet on my own. I'm in no debt, you're right. Going into buying this house, I'm debt free. My credit's great. I have money. Things were looking bright, but I'm using at this point. I remember at the closing, her almost catching me where I was in the bathroom at a place that we were staying at before we closed on our house, and she walked into the bathroom and I had something crushed up, and I like threw it into the sink.
Yeah.
And I don't know how I played it off, but I did. What's important from that is that at the seed level of purchasing that home, of bringing in, a new place for us, new beginning, um, I'm using, right? So I'm bringing that energy from day one into it. And so yeah, it was out of hand, and nobody knew, right? So I'm living basically a double life. Um, in the midst of all of this, prior, maybe 2 years prior to the opioids, we're trying to have a child, right? And one thing that I'd like to just touch on with this subject is, um, we're doing IVF, right? So we're in our late 30s. And what I think a lot of people don't realize about this process is, number one, what the drugs do to a woman, what they do to women is extremely detrimental to their health, right? And I'm not an empathetic person at this point, right? I have no feelings, very cold. And so I'm not present, right? And then what society looks at with that process is, oh, the poor woman can't get pregnant. Oh, she's the issue. And that wasn't the case.
Mm.
I was the issue from all of the drug use, which we didn't know from the beginning because I didn't go to the right doctors, right? We always just assumed, we're both old.
Right.
She's old, right? But it was me. I had, my testosterone levels low hundreds,
Yeah.
if that. My mitochondria level, my sperm wasn't functioning properly. It wasn't swimming. And I didn't realize that. We do this process for 6 years. And I don't realize that till basically the end.
Yeah.
Um, so, I just, to touch on, that society just looks at it's always the woman, it isn't.
Yeah.
And eventually I'd like to give like a man's perspective in that
Right.
because, we always hear the woman's perspective of going through that process. That was a process that affected me negatively and really drove my opioid use
Yeah.
tremendously, just
Yeah.
from that depression of not being successful in having a child. um Wound up being another blessing from God that we didn't have a child.
Yeah.
I know that she didn't see that at the end, but I think now she probably looks back and is very grateful that that never happened, right?
You said she almost caught you. Does she have any idea about this opiate use?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so. And that's another thing that now, as I've been doing a lot of work and even like being around spiritual people and being around an unbelievable community, I had everybody at my disposal that could have helped me. I was never vulnerable enough. I was never honest with myself to go and get that help. And I look back at that and I'm like, how didn't anybody know? I look back at the photos, I look back at my actions. If I didn't have my stuff in the morning and I was waiting for my guy to send it or for me to go pick up, I couldn't get out of bed.
Mm.
I'm a 40-year-old guy. I'm not getting out of bed. And it's just like, oh, I'm sick, you know? I look like total crap. So it's like now when I look back, I'm like, how didn't they know? Is it that nobody was looking at me? You know, so I fight with my insecurities to say, well, was I just not being seen by anybody? Was nobody paying attention to me for them not to know? But no, I just think we are functioning and we're able to hide it. I look at it, as crazy as it may sound, as like I was like an actor, right? I was putting on such an act and living a double life that it's scary.
So you ultimately end up getting sober January 1, 2024. Can you take us through December 2023? So your last month of use and how it came to a head.
Yeah. So it came to a head. I don't want to get too deep into just who I shared it with because it'll just be a whole other long story. But I was close with somebody that was close in our relationship. You know, the marriage that I had. He was close with us. And I got vulnerable with him where I shared it with him, you know? And he was like, "Well, what are you gonna do?" And I said, "I do want to stop. I do, but I can't. I can't, man." And I was out one night with clients at like a dinner, and I remember he was calling me like off the hook, and he's like, "She found something in the house. She's going crazy. You know, you got to come home. I'll come meet you, whatever." So I don't know still to this day if he told her. Doesn't matter because subsequently him, her, they saved my life, you
Mhm.
know? I came home. It was at first the denial, you know, no, I'm not. Oh, maybe I tried it, whatever. And then eventually in that conversation, you know, I dropped down. It was just like, yes, you know, and a weight off my shoulder, really, at that point. You know, it kind of, I remember it feeling good, you know, to just kind of let go and just say yes, right? What I didn't think at that point was what I was in store for in regard to my life, in regard to even what sobriety looked like, because I knew I had an issue, but I still didn't know what was going to happen, right? Um, she immediately called up people that she knew, and you know the wait was probably supposed to be like a month or so, but she got me into an Ibogaine treatment in Mexico within like days. I was there by like I would say the 28th of December. So we had holidays with our family. You know, we didn't share it with anybody, but my parents knew something was up because, you know, come, you know, the third day, because I did have stuff left over, you know, after I was caught where I had to continue to use just because of my health. You
Mhm.
know, I wouldn't have been able to function or to even get on that plane. Um, but once I was done with that, you know, my parents were at the house and, you know, I wasn't able to get out of bed for like 2 days. And I don't know. It was just like, you know, he's sick and, you know, we'll share more at a later date
You went through detox at home.
for a few days.
What was that feeling like?
It was just, I mean, it, you know, it felt like total crap. Like, you know, it's the worst feeling in the world going through that, you know, and I had stints of days where I felt that, but I always got my, you know, my fix. Like I said earlier, I was sending an Uber, living in West Hampton, sending an Uber to Brooklyn, $350 Uber to Brooklyn, 3 hour drive to the Hamptons, watching it the whole way to get my stuff.
You know what's crazy? You
We do
justify
anything.
the 300. You're like, who cares? That's nothing
No,
compared.
yeah, I was just
It's like,
like, you know, I need
oh,
my
just get me
stuff.
the pills. I need the pills.
And the best thing is that I always dealt with one person. So I always knew what I was getting. You know, I
Mm.
never ever dealt with anybody else. And
They were
even
making fentanyl blues.
of course.
during
At that point.
those years that
Absolutely.
you were
Yeah, and I
using
knew
too.
that. I knew that. That's why I always dealt with one person. Really, he was the only person that really knew me, right? He
Right.
knew this secret. He knew this side of me, and to me, that was who I was. That was like my true self. I didn't know anything else
Yeah.
at that point, you know?
So you go to this place in Mexico. Can you describe for the audience what you went through there and what that process was like?
Ibogaine is a beautiful thing. It really is. Are
L-
you familiar with it?
So I know what it is.
Yeah.
Can you
So yeah. So
describe exactly what it is?
right. So it's a psychedelic treatment from I think it's Iboga. It's a African root psychedelic root treatment. I don't want to say similar to ayahuasca because I don't think that's the case. So what it does essentially is that it focuses primarily on alcohol addiction and opioid addiction. And what the treatment did for me, so for me, I didn't hallucinate in the sense where I saw basically a recording of my life go in front of me throughout the treatment. The treatment's an 8 to 10 hour treatment. You're on you have EKG hooked up to you during the treatment. Have an IV of like magnesium. A nurse is in the room the entire time. You're listening to music. And so again, I didn't hallucinate in the sense of seeing things, but yes, I saw my life from a child throughout go in front of me. And I came out of the treatment. What I really feel I got out of the treatment was that like it sucked the opioids right out of me, meaning that, that it was removed out of me and I felt good in the sense that no detox at that point. And they wean you off too. Not that they're giving you, they're not giving me 30s, but they're giving you something to wean you off to get ready for the treatment.
Yeah, a very small dose of some kind of opioid.
Correct.
Could be like Vicodin or something. Yeah,
Something,
just
right.
something to
get
bring
you
down.
ready for that that day.
Got it.
And I do it, I think it was the 31st going into the 1st, which is kind of, energetically was awesome, right? To be starting my year sober, to be getting this out of my system. And it was a 4-year run that I did that, that I was on them. So yeah, I do the treatment. I'm supposed to stay for 10 days in total. So I did the treatment on like say day 3-ish. Come day 5, so I get out of the treatment. Very tired, extremely tired.
It's just one treatment that you do.
So it's one 8 to 10 hour treatment.
Uh-huh.
And you're supposed to do a follow-up 2 days later, which is a small amount, which is only like maybe an hour treatment or like a half hour.
Okay.
I don't get to that point.
Oh, you didn't even do the second
I
treatment?
didn't even do the second.
Okay,
treatment.
but they keep you there just to make sure you're stable by the time you leave.
Stable, and also they keep you there to do really the most necessary work.
Okay.
Is the therapy,
Oh,
is the
wow.
group work, is the deep work that really needs to be done.
Is
at
this
that
with
point.
therapists there and stuff?
Correct.
Okay, that they have
Therapists,
on site.
Yes.
Okay.
And what I'll get into in a little bit, they have an EMDR therapist, which is eye movement desensitization reprocessing,
Mm-hmm.
which is what I'm doing now.
And it's
So
trauma
I'll touch
therapy.
on- Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And I'll touch on that in a few, but they have a therapist for that. So they have this deep, very much necessary work. But I'm like, okay, I don't have withdrawals. I need to get back and fix my life. I need to get back, fix my relationship. I need to get back and fix everything now. Now, also, I'd like to touch. I'm in a crazy amount of debt at this point. Still dealing with some legal issues with businesses, and so I'm like, okay, I got to get back home. Right, this is all that I know is going back to the arrest, humiliate myself, come back, and let's go. Let's get back into my life and try to save stuff. And that was a wrong decision. That was a wrong decision to not stay there. I didn't use, so I come back home. It's January, right? Immediately, my partner at the time is like, we have to live separate. I'll stay in the house, you stay in the apartment in the city, and then we'll switch. You'll come out here, and so that's moving as such. Like I shared with you prior to the episode, I come back and I'm like, all right, I got to share what's been happening to me for the past 20, 25 years. I set up a podcast studio in my office, right? And I have all of these ideas. One thing I like to touch on is as an addict, we're visionaries. I always was. But I'm somebody that had big vision, but I never trusted people enough because I never trusted myself to have people behind my visions and to build a strong team, right? So I'm having all of these ideas and I'm not knowing what to do, and I'm still running wild. I'm not using though. I'm not using. But because I didn't do that work, and now I also don't go into a 12-step right away, or I don't at that point. And I'm losing my mind. My psychopathic behaviors, my vulgar behaviors, my verbal abuse. One thing that I'd like to just touch on is that on top of the addiction is that there's extreme mental health issues here. And one thing that I didn't realize is that I'm affecting somebody else's mental health, right? And that's and that's something that I've had to, in my processing of therapy and everything else that I'm now doing, has been a lot to accept and a lot to swallow, is that I had a severe effect on somebody else, right? And again, I had to go through this process. I think that had I not done the 4 years of opioids, and I would have been vulnerable, and she would have stayed with me, I really don't believe I would have stayed sober. I once the eyes were off me, I would have jumped right back into my use.
Yeah.
And so I'm doing just negative stuff towards her verbally.
And this is what after you got sober.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So you have no solution essentially in your life. Like
I don't realize what just happened.
Yeah,
I don't
of
realize
course.
what I just did for the past 4 years, and then even though years prior, but I'm
Right.
not processing it at all.
It's like, I got sober. I'm good. Guys, look at me. I got sober.
Correct.
Everything's all good. And we think the trust, we think that the wreckage from our past, everything just poof disappears. And it's not like that. And this is very important. I want to share this. This is why a program is necessary. There's a lot of guilt, shame, grief, not just on our end, but from the family's end as well. And
I want to touch on that.
Yeah, so
for
go
a little
ahead,
bit.
go ahead.
So just what happens with me is pretty remarkable in the sense that now I'm part of a very tight-knit, amazing spiritual community. A lot of their principles are very aligned with 12-step, with the AA program, extremely.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what happens with me is something very different from many, right? And so as we're taught is somebody in pain, let's embrace them, let's help them, let's give them love, right? That didn't happen with me. And that didn't happen with me, and I didn't seek it, number one, right? Number two, in some crazy way, they knew by letting me go that I would get to this point of where I need to be. That I wouldn't have reacted well if people from the community were telling me to show up, right? Because I was still so much a victim and so angry and needed to figure out so much on my own. I wasn't even able to breathe without this person. In the year gap up until January of this year, I was like, well, where are you? What's going on? Like, I didn't even know how to stay sober, right? I thought that I needed somebody to help me in the sense of the relationship, but I took my way out of the community. I moved down here. And I didn't really know what to do with myself, right? And so I started focusing on my health and wellness first and foremost, right? I started with that, um, and I started just getting the strength within myself. And what I'd like to touch on that is that being an only child, I'm most comfortable by myself, and I mean that like genuinely. Like I go out now to dinners by myself. It's helping with my confidence. It's helping with my self esteem. I don't have many friends, and I like it that way because I've hurt so many people. And until I continue to help myself and get myself to a better place, I don't want people around me that I could affect in a negative aspect.
Hmm.
So, and it's comforting to me. You know, I share it to some people and they're like, "Well, I'm your friend." And I'm like, "I know you're my friend, but um it's I'm most comfortable alone, you know? And one thing that I do want to touch, because I know that a big conversation of yours is triggers, right? And I don't want you to be alarmed by this or concerned by this. One of my biggest pleasures now is going to an amazing restaurant by myself, is going to even like a lounge by myself. And I'll tell you why, because I never use because of the environment that I was in. I use because of who I was. You know, being around alcohol is not going to make me want to use. When I'm in an establishment like that, I'm actually seeing that I was so lost then and I wasn't able to be confident and happy, that now I'm going into those environments because it genuinely makes me feel very, very good. And I'm getting out of my shell. I have amazing connections with people every single time that I do it. And a part of the brand that I'd like to build is that sober people can still enjoy a nightlife scene. And I'm not saying I'm going out to all hours of the night, but what I'm starting to see in New York is mocktail bars opening, you
Mhm.
know, mocktail clubs opening, and that we can still be in an environment, if it isn't a trigger for some people, where we could still enjoy beautiful people, beautiful things,
Yep.
you know, and that's something that I genuinely like, and I do it alone, and it's very satisfying for me.
So I do want to say that just because we get sober, it doesn't mean that we need to live like a mute in our house
Correct. Right.
24/7. I still go once in a while if my friends are going out and they are going to dinner and then a bar after. I'll go with them to the bar after. I don't. eh, My sobriety is contingent upon the program that I am working at that time.
Sure.
If I'm working a good program and I am connected, the decision not to pick up, whether it's drugs, alcohol, act out in any other way, gambling, I'm not going to do it. It's a decision that I make every single day.
Mhm.
If I am not working a good program, my decision making is going to be off.
Right.
And I continue to hang out in those bars more and more and more. I then become a product of that environment. And
For you.
I'm probably going to
Right.
pick up a drink. I'm not saying that's the case for you
Yeah.
because it sounds like you're doing the work on yourself.
I'm
And
doing the work on myself and with myself. What I'd like to share of a trigger for me. So a trigger for me in the beginning was, first of all, my routine of New York. New York was a huge trigger for me.
when
Now
did you leave New York?
I left New York in October, so
Okay,
I
so you've
didn't
been,
use, but it was a huge trigger in the fact that it was just part of my routine,
yep.
right? And so New York was a big trigger for me. And now it's not a trigger in the sense of drugs, but it's a trigger to negative stuff. Like when I go there, I'm not healthy. I'm like inflamed. I just don't feel energetically the way that I feel down here.
Mm-hmm.
Another huge trigger for me is that I associate a lot of my using with my success. And that's the issue that I'm dealing with now, is that I focus so much on my health, my well-being. I go, you know, I'm take testosterone. I go to my longevity doctor every week. You know, I did an IV today of methylene blue. I'm very much into that, right? my trigger of using and success, has not gotten me to focus on business. I struggle with that, and that's something that I want your audience to understand, is that having the ADHD, adding this heavy drug use for 20 plus years, has had a very, very negative effect on my brain. Extremely, extremely. There's things, small things that I want to start doing that I don't. And it's a problem, but again, I know that I need to get my health first and foremost, my mental health, my physical health, to a place where then I can focus on that.
Yeah. Well, I want to commend you on a year and a half, coming up on 2 years of sobriety. I do want to go back very quickly. Thank you for sharing the process in Mexico, and it is a psychedelic. Is that correct?
Psychedelic. Yes.
Okay. So you did the psychedelic one time, and then you started your sobriety time after that, essentially.
Correct.
So I love this show, and I love bringing different guests on who have different methods and different ways that they got sober, because there isn't one way to get sober. I go to 12-step. There are people in 12-step that say 12-step is the only way. 12-step worked for me. If you ask me how I got sober, I'll tell you how I got sober.
Mm-hmm.
I do not judge anyone, because I know there is some judgment.
Something I want to ask.
Well, you want to ask?
Go ahead. Keep going.
So a lot of 12-step people will say you can't get sober that way. That is not it. Psychedelic. But you did a psychedelic, and then you stayed sober for a year and a half. I did probably 50 oxys my last day using, and then I got sober. Now I did a program and everything. It's not like you're continuing with psychedelics. You're not doing a maintenance
I'm
every
actually
month.
Petrified.
Exactly.
Like
so
I've
you
thought
haven't
of like
used,
ayahuasca. I'm like, I'm scared.
You haven't used in a year and a half. So
Right.
I don't see it is what it is. I'm not, if someone asked me how I got sober through a program, a 12-step program. What I love about your story is it's different from mine. And you're here today and you're talking about the work that you are doing on yourself. Different triggers that trigger you and the changes you've implemented in your life. And I love that you didn't say it live. You said it before we went live, but you said, I said, oh, you're doing great. You're coming up on 2 years. You're like, yes, but I have so much more work that I need to do on myself. And I love that, because the ego of the work stuff and the success that you've had, I got very egotistical when I had success in my career, and it would perpetuate my drug use and my drinking and all those other bad behaviors that followed along. But the ego, pride has been complete. You said you're half Irish. We're very prideful people. I'm Irish as well. That has been sucked out of you.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to know, on a daily basis, what are you doing? Are there any practices that you take part in?
So I really want to mention the EMDR therapy.
Yeah.
Because this has been game changing for me. And there's a few points that if I may touch on.
Please.
So I'm doing it twice a week for an hour to
Still.
Still.
Amazing.
So that's, that's part of my process, right? Is once and I'd like to share something very important for me. What I've seen with the process of my life, spiritual practices, things that have been positive in my life, is once I start seeing the positive effect that they have in my life, typically I'll say, okay, what else could I get out of it? And then be done with it. So having that awareness that, yes, I'm doing it twice a week for either an hour to 2 hour treatment, right? And this is something important that I wanted to share early on, but I skipped it, is that I chose today for a reason. So when you got back to me so quickly, right? I was so anxious to get here, and I was going to email you like 2 months ago, right? And for me, timing is everything. I probably wasn't ready 2 months ago. And I picked today for a reason. And that reason is it's my ex's birthday today. Energetically, I thought I want to be here on her birthday. Not only that, one thing that I'd like to just share that is important, and again, it's, it's not looking for anything from anybody, but it's important to just show what has changed with me through this treatment, through how I focus on my mental health, the EMDR treatment. I'm somebody that's always led with hatred, vulgar, everything that I shared earlier, jealousy, always led with that, right? I didn't know love. I didn't know empathy. I didn't know how to give compassion, affection. Never, never, ever, ever. And so what transpired in probably like the past 6, 8 weeks is I started coming from that place towards that relationship of just sending peace, sending love, sending healing energy. And so a change happened. That's the first time in my life I'm feeling these positive emotions and really sensations going through my body. And I'm so happy to not only say but feel is that, she's now being taken care of, and she now has somebody in her life that is loving her, that is making her feel safe, protected, giving her the affection that I was never able to provide. And that's something that I'm only feeling this way from the work that I've been doing, So I don't want to get ahead of myself, right? But it's something that I am proud with myself because I've never come from a place like this ever.
Wow.
And that's a special thing, and I'll share something off camera with you, something that I did that it feels right.
Yeah.
It feels right to be feeling that. This is somebody I spent 15 years with, and to be able to genuinely feel that, that she's with somebody that will now take care of her the way that I could never, feels good. It really feels good.
Well, it sounds like you're leading from a place of love and compassion.
I am, and I've never felt that. I've really never felt that in my life. With my parents, I never felt, towards them, I always had anger towards them, and that's gotten better. And we have a great, great relationship, my parents, besides them, it's them. I have them, myself, and my dog, right? And so our relationship is great. Um, so it's just a good feeling to feel that, It's a good feeling that do I still get angry? Not towards those situations or those people, but yes, I still get angry, but and everybody gets angry. It's just processing that anger in better ways, right?
Is this feeling about your ex and you genuinely being happy that she is with someone who is making her feel safe and protected in a healthy relationship? Is this like a new feeling that you've had or
Came up, I'm doing EMDR now for probably 2 months. So it came up during this time.
yeah.
Very new,
Wow.
very new. And I could tell you that, as I shared with you earlier, is that things have always taken me a very long time to do in life.
Yeah.
Like even like with just an example of the podcast studio,
Yeah.
right? I set it up in my office. I haven't done anything with it yet.
Yeah.
This has transpired in 6 months. My last like kind of outburst with her was at the end of January. And that was like the last time we spoke, right? So the fact that I'm doing it now at the beginning, is just kind of speaks volumes for the work that I'm doing. But again, I'm not going to get ahead of myself. This is not only a relationship, but a time period of my life that I will always be correcting in so many ways, right? For the rest of my life. So it feels amazing. I just wanted to share that.
That's a beautiful story.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that there is so much love in the world and that we can be happy for people.
Mm-hmm.
I was
Yes.
so insecure with myself that anytime me and a ex would break up or something, I would take it so personal and not fully empathize or understand with maybe their upbringing or what I was actually doing to them.
Never
selfishly,
realized, you know?
and never took accountability for that.
Yes.
So the fact that you are able to take accountability today,
And accepting it is like been amazing.
yes,
Accepting
yes,
it and just understanding that I needed to separate myself, you know. I needed to, it was the end, you know. That's what got me sober, you
yeah.
know, leaving a community and now just gradually trying to get back into the community within, you know, they have a community down here that I'm trying to get back into. But
Mm.
I needed to be separated because some way, somehow they knew that I had the strength within me to hopefully start on this, you know.
Well, without her, you wouldn't be here today,
Correct.
sober.
Right.
So
Correct. In many ways.
I want to congratulate you
Thank you.
on all the success
I
and
appreciate it.
personal success and the
Yeah.
work that you've done on, yourself. And I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you getting vulnerable with us.
Thank
And
you.
this
Yes.
is definitely going to help a lot of people. So thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me.